Hello, viewers. Russ Barkley here. It's a cooler day in Richmond, but I couldn't resist one last time putting on a t-shirt before the fall, colder weather begins to move in on us here. Today, I want to speak to you about a subject I'm often asked by adults with ADHD, and that is what are the ADHD friendly jobs that are out there? And in order to answer that, I think first of all, we should take a look at what are the job requirements. And then we can go through and see what jobs are out there that might be able to meet those requirements for someone with ADHD. Beyond that, I would suggest that you simply Google ADHD success stories, and you will see a whole list of successful people who succeeded in rather non-traditional fields, actually, like Simone Biles or Justin Timberlake or Bubba Watson in golf or Charlie Hull in golf. Athletes, plenty of them as well, not to mention Adam Levine in music and others. So have a look at that, and that might give you some ideas about the kinds of occupations or vocations that you might want to have a look at. But in general, we're looking for jobs that allow a lot more activity rather than being sedentary. I mean, all of this makes sense when you think about the symptoms of ADHD, the difficulties with executive functioning, with sustained attention, distractibility, excessive verbal interactions with others, and so on. So how active is this occupation, or how sedentary is it going to be? I mean, obviously, if you're going to be out there moving, teaching athletics to others, that's a lot different than if you're going to be sitting in an office doing tax returns. The same is true with the degree to which sustained attention is required. So if you have to keep looking at, say, x-rays in radiology for hours at a time, trying to pick up subtle differences in the x-rays that are important for medical diagnosis, then that's going to be a problem. So we strongly encourage you not to go into something like neuroimaging reading, but instead go to work, say, in an emergency room. So we're looking for how much does the task require sustained attention, and especially to tasks or activities that are not very rewarding or stimulating. Is the job indoors or outdoors? A lot of adults with ADHD have told us that they really prefer jobs that allow them to move around a lot out of doors. We'll take a look at what a few of those might be. And if they're indoors, do they still allow for much more movement and interaction with others? How much is it manual? How much is it getting your hands involved in doing things as opposed to thoughtful, cognitive, reflective in nature? People with ADHD find that manual activities where they can interact with the components of the task, build things, assemble things, take things apart. I mean, think about Ty Pennington and America's Extreme Home Makeover, where the guy gets to make a living out of destroying houses and rebuilding them. That's an extreme example, but you get the point. So people with ADHD, while they certainly can be reflective and intellectual, often find that they like to use their hands a lot more in their activities. To what extent is there paperwork involved in this? I mean, I have relatives that went into the business of working with insect people who come into your house and spray for insects, these exterminators. And they found that they love doing stuff like that, crawling under houses and helping people to, eliminate these pests from their home. But at the end of the day, when they had to go back to the office and do their paperwork, it was a major problem for them. So, how much paperwork are you going to have to do as part of this task? Similarly, are you going to be working with others? Is this a social kind of job? People with ADHD seem to be better at that because they're talkative, engaging, they like interacting. Or is it going to be alone a lot of the time, solitary, which people with ADHD may find to be just way too tedious, boring, and just not active enough? How fast paced is the action going to be in this job, or how slow paced is it going to be? Are you going to be interacting with customers a lot, say through fast food industry or the restaurant business or sales? Or are you going to be, again, stuck in an office looking at a computer screen trying to track the sales of other people in the field while you have to sit here and engage in screen time? How much change is in the work environment. Are you going to be in the same place, the same room, the same cubicle every day for hours on end? Or do you get to move around a lot, whether indoors or out of doors, where there's a lot of change in the places where you're going to be asked to do work? I'll mention a few things like photography and videography, for instance, that might fulfill that kind of change in activity. How much excitement is in the job? Does it involve police work, firemen, EMT, or is this going to be, again, something where you're a librarian or you're a bookkeeper or accountant, or where you're going to be doing, again, sedentary versus active work, exciting versus not especially exciting or stimulating work? Then finally, how much verbal interaction will you have with others? People with ADHD really seem to do better at that, as opposed to being put in a situation where they're going to have to be very quiet. There's not a lot of verbal interaction going on. I mean, think about being a librarian in that case. So just look at the job and the requirements of the job and see how well it maps onto your ADHD symptoms. And then here's some jobs that people with ADHD have told me that they found to be very well suited to them. First of all, I've already mentioned policemen, firemen, emergency medical tech. I mean, there are certainly boring aspects of those jobs, but there's also a lot of excitement, a lot of movement in getting from place to place and handling a crisis and helping people out that are in emergency situations. Related to that, what about being an emergency room physician or nurse? If you're going to go to medical school or nursing school, that's a good choice of a specialty for you. Excuse me. What about the military? Again, people with ADHD tell us that the structure that the military provides is very good for them. It provides training, it provides medical care, it provides your food for you. There's a variety of things, not to mention the kind of technical training that you can get through the military. But the structure seems to be beneficial to some adults with ADHD. Another one that I see people with ADHD engaged in is door-to-door sales, where they are moving from place to place, whether they're working with business to business, like marketing clothing, or working in the fashion industry, or whether they're working in car sales. That kind of movement, activity, engaging new people all the time can be rather exciting to someone with ADHD. I have met a lot of drug reps for pharmaceutical companies that are adults with ADHD, and their day is spent going from office to office to office to clinic, meeting with doctors very briefly, usually for 5 to 15 minutes, leaving materials behind, talking about their new drugs or other agents or tools. But it's the movement that they find so helpful to them in being able to focus on their job, yet engage, change, and go from place to place. Again, manual labor. Be a tradesperson. Could you be a carpenter, a plumber, landscaper, electrician? Could you be an auto mechanic or work as a bricklayer or a tile layer, work in construction? Again, people with ADHD like hands-on activities, in my experience, more than they like intellectual, thoughtful activities where there's a lot of forethought involved. Not that they can't do those things or even go for advanced education in the professions, but I find that in some ways they enjoy the interaction of the manual activity with the components of the task. Athletics, as you'll see from ADHD success stories online, is an area where many adults with ADHD have found success. And if they're not professional athletes or not as talented to achieve that level of status within the field, moving into teaching athletics and being an athletic director or a personal trainer would be another way of using your propensity for athletics in a good way that would allow you to be employed. What about also looking at sports journalism, where you could be a communications major and you would be able to go out to these games, you'd be able to be the announcer on the game and do the interviews and call the play-by-play. Those are things that people with ADHD sometimes find to be very stimulating for them. If you like computers and you like technology, maybe working on the computer help desk as an IT consultant, where you get to go from one room to another in the building, helping people solve their IT problems and using your expertise and your hands-on experience with the hardware not just the software. The food service industry is another place that we've seen adults with ADHD succeed, whether they have their own restaurants, whether they're in the culinary profession as expert chefs working for someone else in a restaurant, whether they have food trucks and get to move from place to place and interact with people while they manually, obviously, are working with the food to create their product. This is another place where people might find adult ADHD to be more suitable to that kind of occupation. And then other kinds of work to take a look at: the hospitality industry, working at hotels and resorts, where again you can work at the front desk, you can work within um, uh, the resorts where you're going to be doing wedding planning and you're going to be helping people set up and take down and do their booking. So just that kind of activity that allows you to move and interact with others. I've already mentioned becoming a personal trainer. If you happen to be interested in physical fitness or athletics, that's not a bad way to go. I know some adults work in the outdoor resort adventures industry where they're instructors who get to work at these resorts where they're skiing, kayaking, cycling, hiking, just all kinds of outdoor activities that they find engaging, stimulating, and exciting. Becoming self-employed and having your own business is another way. In fact, we find that in our longitudinal studies, adults with ADHD seem to drift into self-employment after a while, in part because it allows them to set their own schedule, work at their own pace, determine what their work requirements are going to be, but also it may help engage some of that entrepreneurial spirit that some adults with ADHD have. And then, of course, becoming an inventor and an entrepreneur, which is a little different than just being self-employed because there's a creative side to that kind of occupation or activity. I mentioned becoming a photographer or videographer. I've worked a lot with people who have created videos for me, professional videos. I've also done a lot of interviews with television and radio where people in that industry have found that they do well with adult ADHD because they're taking their cameras and their recording equipment, and every day they're going to multiple sites. I mean, imagine working for a television studio where you're being sent out to 3, 4, 5 different locations in any given day to capture footage that's going to be used on the nightly news. And obviously, you may even have a hand in editing what's going to be used. But again, that kind of movement and use of technology and interacting with technology might be just the thing for you if you have a propensity for photography or videography. And then let's not forget the performing arts as well. Actors, stand-up comedians, musicians, and other performers find that this provides a very active lifestyle for them where they get to engage audiences, move from place to place, venue to venue, that fits in well with their hyperactive sort of behavior and lifestyle. So again, just some things to think about when you're looking at vocations or occupations that you might do well in with adult ADHD. I hope you found this helpful. Please tune in again for other commentaries that I may have coming up in the next few weeks. And then, as always, recommend the channel if you like our content, recommend it to others, and please subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Thanks for tuning in, and hope to see you again on the channel. Be well.